Hey gang, Jason here with 117. It is day 7 here in Pennsylvania of the coronavirus protocols, and the governor has closed all non-essential businesses, and people are really starting to take this thing serious, hoping that we can kick this in the butt in the next week or two. But there's been some challenges that have started to sprout up that I think we need to talk about. You've probably noticed them already, but the reality is that social distancing kind of flies in the face of who we are as creatures who are social. You know, we want to get together and we want to do dinner together and hang out at a bar. We want to talk and chat and do life together. And being isolated and in quarantine, it feels like there's this huge limit that's been placed on our freedoms. I can't help but relate to the kids on spring break who are at the beaches saying, hey, this isn't going to let me stop my spring vacation. But the reality is we need to take a step back. We need to look out for the greater good of all of us. And in the midst of all that, it starts to create some fear. Yesterday, I was over at Costco, and the line came out the front door and around the side of the building as the staff was trying to create 6 feet between each customer. And one woman even asked as I was walking by, are they rationing how much you can purchase? And she was glad to hear them say, yes, you can only buy so much. You know, that starts to build fear in people and wondering, will there be enough for me? We start to hoard and we start to empty the store shelves. I went to the local grocery store after Costco and I saw shelves and shelves of empty canned goods and empty bread aisles. And we wonder, is there gonna be enough? Earlier in the week, I had watched a documentary from the BBC on Wuhan and how they handled the 30 days in quarantine. It felt apocalyptic. The streets were empty, the mass transit systems had shut down, and the people who were driving around in hazmat suits to protect themselves. And as much as we think that we're immune, as much as we think we're safe, we start to wonder, is there anything that we can do? You know, Roosevelt's words from the Great Depression feel cliche. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Really? This fear is pretty big. I need some way that we can build community. As people of faith, I believe that there's a lot that we can do to build community, and I think there's some things that we've kind of taken for granted. If you look in the Old Testament, in Isaiah chapter 1, God is preaching to a people who are pretty privileged. The nation of Israel is pretty wealthy, they're well-to-do and set. They really don't need a lot of other people. And their faith has turned into just a routine of making the appropriate sacrifice for all the list of sins that you've committed. And God speaks through the prophet Isaiah and he says, look, I want you to learn to do good. You've forgotten what it's like. Seek justice. Find it wherever you go. Help the oppressed. Defend the cause of widows and orphans. Fight for their rights. You know, it came at a time when Israel thought that it was just about me. It was about my rights and my needs, and it really didn't matter for anyone else. Most people didn't need one another, and they certainly didn't feel like they needed God. It's not too different from where we might find ourselves today. Our culture has become very individual. Our faith is confined in the temple and in the church, and we do the prescribed things of faith, but when it comes to actually bringing it home, have we learned to value one another? Because Isaiah speaks out to the people then as he does to us today. We've lost focus on God's value of you as a person. You see, that was God's plan all along, is that the community would care for one another, that we would help one another, the least among us. That's where God's system of tithing comes in. That's where God reaches out to the people in the Exodus and says, look, care for the orphans, the widows, and the aliens. Those who aren't among your people, those who aren't from your people, take care of them too. And brothers and sisters, that's what we need right now. Even in the midst of this coronavirus, even with our fears mounting, there's a lot of things that we can do to build community. And I want to encourage you to take stock of this week and the coming week, because it's starting. The last week's been hard, and the next week's just going to get harder. So the first thing that you can do is check in on one another. You've probably already checked out a lot of social media where people are posting about how they're coping with their kids. But there's some things that you can do with your neighbors. We don't go door to door anymore like we used to, but people have doors and doorbells, and even with social distancing, there's a way that you can check in. Just to knock on the door and say, hey, wanted to make sure that everybody's okay. You don't know if they may have come down sick, and do they need someone to call for help? My grandmother is in her 80s, and the neighbors have all checked in on her, and they went to the store for her, and they've been delivering food. That is a great gift. And even if you don't want to run to the store, some of you have stockpiles of toilet paper, and maybe that's the sort of thing you can share. Can you share your stockpile? And as you're checking in on one another, sometimes maybe we can create some community. I have a friend that every once in a while, they do dinner out at the curb. Their neighbors all get together and they grab whatever they were going to do for dinner, and they meet out at the curb in front of their house at the same time. You can practice social distancing because no doubt you're going to be 6 to 10 feet from one another, but you can still be social and all be outside at the same time. In my neighborhood, we have condos with the decks all connected to one another, about 6 feet apart. And we can all do dinner at the same time. And it's just one of those little ways that you can remind yourselves that you're still in community. Now, of course, our broader community needs us as well. It's said that a lot of small businesses are not going to support this. They're not going to survive this coronavirus. My son, his after-school care, their teachers are hourly employees. Are they going to be taken care of? Sure, the federal government is passing unemployment standards and they're trying to create opportunities for people, but the reality is that every business is also a consumer. Everybody that sells something also buys something. And so this isn't just going to have an impact on the small businesses, it's going to have an impact on the big businesses. That means all of us, whether you're small or large. I want to encourage you that if there's a way that you can support local businesses, support people even in this time of need, that's going to make all the difference in the world. United we stand, divided we fall. That was the rally call through the revolution, and that needs to be the rally call for us through this coronavirus. Our strength is in our numbers, so be intentional about shopping with local businesses and small people. If you have some kind of subscription service through your local gym, through an art studio, or through some other group in the area, I want to encourage you as much as you can to try to keep supporting that. Try to keep paying those fees and those dues as they might be appropriate. If there's other ways that you can reach out to the local mom and pop sub shop or the hair studio that just got closed down, how can you help them and be creative with ways to support them in this time of need? It's going to take our efforts deliberately to help one another. Current statistics, current estimates say that as this thing proceeds longer and longer, the governments, local and federal, are going to be relying on nonprofits to help fill the void, to respond to this disaster. And disaster response people are already gearing up. They're already looking for ways that they can help and they can support. I was out helping yesterday at a local food pantry because a lot of the older volunteers, they had to stay inside. They couldn't come out and serve because they are a vulnerable population. So how is it that you can help reach out? Because unfortunately, a lot of our nonprofits, the YMCAs, the United Ways, and the churches in the areas, they've had to close down their weekly meetings. Their income streams are drying up. Unfortunately, the reality is that when people don't go to church, they also don't give. And so how can you help support these nonprofits that are going to turn around and help support the community? Many churches rely, many organizations rely on this weekly giving. So I want to encourage you that you can find a way to help continue giving and supporting. Whether it's online or whether it's mailing in some kind of gift, it's going to make all the difference in the world to help keep them open. Because even though they're not there, even though you might not be there, They still have bills that are there and ever present. And as this continues, they're going to be reaching out with the food and the supplies and the financial aid to the most vulnerable among us in the community. So find ways that you can support them financially, but also see if you can help support as a volunteer. Because like I said yesterday, the older volunteers can't come out. So where can you help fill in the gap that we can weather this storm together? You see, that's the key, and that's what Isaiah was speaking to the people so long ago in verse 117. He was saying, learn to do good. Find ways to be community, because caring for community is of utmost importance. And if you look through the major prophets, if you look through some of the minor prophets, even if you look in the wisdom passages of Proverbs, you will find that this message of community is echoed time and again. God doesn't harp on the 10 Commandments. He doesn't harp on the laws that He gave to Moses. He harps on this idea that God cared for you when you were a stranger. God cared for you when you were an outcast. God cared for you when you were helpless and vulnerable. And if we're going to be God's people, we've got to go and do likewise. So I want to encourage you, friends, if you have ideas about how you can support your community, how you can reach out to one another, I want you to leave them in the comments below. We'll also post them on our website, weare117.org. Y'all, I'm Jason, and this is 117.